Cash Flow Diary Podcast, episode 354.
Welcome to yet another exciting episode of the Cash Flow Diary Podcast, the podcast that teaches you insider tips, tactics, and strategies for creating leverage streams of cash flow into your life. Learn from top-performing entrepreneurs, business owners, investors, and thought leaders from across the globe as they share their secrets to success. Like what you learn on this and other Cash Flow Diary podcast episodes? Go to learninvestingnow.com and sign up to receive powerful tips and information that will help you succeed as an entrepreneur and investor. Now, here's your host, investor, entrepreneur, business owner, educator, speaker, author, and master facilitator of Robert Kiyosaki's cash flow game, Jay Massey.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Cash Flow Diary Podcast. I'm your host, Jay Massey, and I'm glad that you're here today because we are going to talk about, well, many different things. Why do I say many different things? Because when it comes down to it, you and I, as entrepreneurs, our journey takes many twists and turns and often leads us to places we never even thought we were going to go. And I think today's guest is going to be able to help you understand your own entrepreneurial journey in a completely different fashion. And most importantly, he's got a new book that I think you're going to want to pick up as well. So what does that mean? That means today we are speaking with none other than Mr. Will Arntz. Many of you may know him from a particular movie that we're going to be talking about as well. But most importantly, let me tell you something that I think is really interesting. He started as a research laser physicist. Now, many of you are like, I never even heard of that. Like, what is that? You remember the Star Wars program? Yeah, he was there before it was called the Star Wars program. And then there's a automated job control system called AutoSys. You're like, yeah, we're talking to the guy who like wrote it. And then more importantly, where I remember the first thing is what the bleep do we know? Do you remember that movie? Well, we're talking to the guy, and now he's got a book, the not so little Book of Surprises. I'm pretty excited to hear this eclectic, collection, if you will, of experience. And I think you and I are going to have a lot to learn. So make sure that you are ready. Pull out that pen, that paper, or that iPad to take some notes and listen to Mr. William Arntz. Will, you there?
I am here.
How are you, sir?
Very good. And, I got all excited. That was a great intro. I got all excited. I'm like, I'm going to take notes too. This sounds like this will be a good interview. And I kind of forgot for a moment it was me.
I totally understood. What I think is interesting is your journey is not a straight line, sir.
No.
That is not a straight line. So now, this being the first time that you are here, I have to ask you the same question that I ask everybody the first time that they're here. Are you ready?
I hope so.
All right. So I tend to look at today's entrepreneurs a lot like yesterday's superheroes. Batman, Robin, Wonder Woman, the Fantastic Four. I don't know. The point is, I think entrepreneurs and superheroes have a ton of things in common. For example, as an entrepreneur, occasionally we get dressed up, or we at least imagine ourselves wearing capes and tights and saving our customers and using our special skills and abilities. But also, like superheroes, entrepreneurs have a beginning. I mean, if you think about Spider-Man, before he was, Spider-Man, he was just Peter Parker going to school, taking some photos and, trying to get good grades. That's pretty much it. So before he became Spider-Man, he gets bit by the spider, something happens to him, and he has to now choose to use his newfound ability for good or for evil. Like I said, he was just a regular college student. He has an origin story. So my question to you, sir, is before the movies, before AutoSys, before the research laser physicist, that by the way, that's just amazing in my head. It's like, wow, that's really smart. That's not me, but way to go. Before all of those things, my question to you is, who is William Arntz?
Aha. Yeah, that's sort of the beginning question and the end question. Because years and years also, you didn't include in the little bio, years and years of spiritual practice and some spiritual teachers and whatnot. In the end, they always say, well, ultimately, the whole quest is, who am I? Who are you? Who really is underneath all the accolades and the successes and failures? Who really, really is that? And let me just say, I'm still chewing that one over. I'm not quite sure.
Okay.
Yeah, it's because it's the onion. You peel onion, you realize you have an experience, you do something. For me, one of the things I always wanted to do was be very successful. Just be very successful, and so that was something that really drove me, especially when I was doing AutoSys, writing the software and everything. I just wanted to really knock one out of the park. Is just kind of the feeling. So, but then of course the thing is, well, the person after you knock it out of the park is different than the person before. So what's the real you?
Indeed. Well, I would say selling AutoSys for tens of millions would be knocking it out of the park. I mean, at least by my definition.
Well, that's what I figured too. So it happened. I sold my first company, and it was like, oh, that's great. And I remember that the day that the deal finally signed, I signed the paper. It was a done deal. The wires went. It all happened, and afterwards I went to the store to get something to make for dinner. And I'm there at the checkout, and I'm like, wow, there you go. I did it, and wow, it's interesting. I expected I was going to be flying on cloud 9, but I was actually just relieved. It was like, oh, okay, I pulled it off.
Totally get that. So let me ask it this way. Were you born entrepreneurial family? You just woke up one day and said, Mom, I want the lemonade stand, and that you just kept going from there? Or what was that journey like?
Well, I was never really very entrepreneur-ish. I mean, I never did that. I didn't have a newspaper route. I really didn't do that. What it was more about being creative. Okay. And so when I grew up in a little farm town in Pennsylvania, and there was nothing to do. So my friends and I, back in the 60s, we were making movies. We'd steal Dad's 8mm camera, and we started making movies, and we would write little plays, and we wrote comic books, and we were always creating something. So for me, that was always the main impetus for what I did. Was something would just like grab my fancy, and then I would just get into creating it, and it was off to the races.
Interesting. So how do you go from movies, plays, and comic books to research laser physicist? You gotta help me.
Well, that was a very practical decision. I was really good in high school in math and science. My dad was an engineer. Mm-hmm. He worked at a company like a lot of engineers do, and not entrepreneurial, that's for sure. And so it was like, well, I'm going to go to college. So and I really liked math and science anyway. It's not that like it was torture. I really liked it. And so I'm like, well, I guess I'll get a degree in that. And that way, when I graduate from college, I'll be able to get a good job. And that was it. Once I got into college, it turns out I liked the math and the physics more than I even thought I would.
I see.
So that's how that happened.
Okay. That makes sense. Because I guess in this journey that we call life, we often discover, through various different, interactions that, hey, I didn't know I was going to like this much. So, okay, that makes some sense there. And then you move. So you were working for a company like straight out of college. Is that correct? If I understand.
Correct.
All right. So then two things has to happen in order for AutoSys to exist. One, you have to have what I call that superhero moment where you realize, hey, I have a special skill or ability that I can use here to serve other people. And then two, you have to develop the courage to go, you know what, I'm going to go do my own thing. So my question is one, how did you find out, discover that, A, I've got a special ability, and two, how did you develop the courage to actually go do it?
Well, realizing the special ability, I mean, I knew when I did the research laser physics stuff, what they had me do was do computer modeling for these high energy laser systems, and they hadn't been able to do it with wave optics ever. So they assigned me to do that. And at one point, there was a program that the Air Force wanted written that they said would take 2.5 man years in order to develop this program. So they wanted me to write a little prototype, just a little corner of it, to show that maybe we could do it so that the company I worked with would get the bigger contract. Well, make a long story short, in 3 weeks, I wrote the whole thing that was supposed to take 2.5 man years. Yeah. So at that point, it was like fairly obvious, like that I was, and they were quite, they started calling me Einstein around the office because it was like, it was like, you can't do it. And I'm like, well, I did it. So I knew that I had the chops, but I didn't really have the entrepreneurial spirit yet. But I did have the thing that always I've been like, if something I really get into, I just do it. I call it the Spanky in our gang moment, which is a little different than superheroes.
Got it.
But there was this, cartoons of Spanky in our gangs, and it's like Spanky goes, "Hey everyone, what do you say we go make a movie and change the world? Okay, Spanky, let's go do it." And so I've always been kind of like that. I mean, once I get inspired for something, people think I'm crazy. That doesn't really bother me. They think it won't work. If I think it will, I don't really care what they think. And I just go to do it. But there's a third part that's the missing piece of all this.
Oh.
And this is, you talked about the strange twists and turns.
Yes.
The strange twist and turn for AutoSys was back in my early 30s, I'd become more and more interested in spiritual things. And I got a teacher. His name was Rama. And Rama had this idea that his students should learn computers because it strengthens the mind. And he said, look, you're going to have to earn something in this world because we live in the West. If you do computers, it's going to get really big. And that way you can, live a nice life. So all the students started learning computers. I luckily already knew it. And then eventually he said, now you got to get a computer job. So everyone does that. Then you got to become a consultant and be a consultant to computers. And then he moved us all to the New York metro area and said, now you got to go down and consult on Wall Street because they're the leading edge of the computer stuff and they'll help your chops. And finally, he said, okay, your final task is to write a piece of software, build a company around it, and sell it for millions. So the entrepreneurial spirit came more as a kick in the butt, you could say, or it was the spiritual task. And I've been studying with this teacher for 10 years. And this was the task. And so I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to go do it. At that point, so I was in a milieu where all the students are like talking about doing their companies and that sort of thing. And I started thinking about it. And then what kind of was the final kicker was I decided I wanted to escape what I called the gravitational pull of money. Mm. When you're in a rocket, if you get out of the atmosphere and you get enough speed, you can circle the planet forever and it takes no energy. I wanted to earn enough money so that I could just live off of the interest forever. And I would never have to worry about money or work again. And that was really a driving thing because I didn't really like, I liked working, but I didn't like going into work. And quite honestly, with having my own company, you're dealing with customers and that can be trying. So it's like, I just want to be free of all that. And so that was really the final booster that lit my sails, and off I went to do AutoSys.
Interesting. So you're saying it was basically a homework assignment.
It was a homework assignment, a spiritual homework assignment.
I like it. I like it.
Yeah.
Okay. So this actually brings up something I think is interesting and that probably doesn't get talked about enough, and I think you would be perfect, is there is a spiritual side to running a business and nearly everything that we do for that matter, but that journey, or to be able to develop that side and running a business, most people would view that as that those two things are at odds with one another. Yet I'm going to make the assumption that you found a way to reconcile both of those, that there's a way to, you can do good and do well all at the same time. Yes?
Yes. And, part of that is you want to, like my AutoSys was an automation system for computers. And people were trying to do a lot of stuff sort of by hand coding stuff, and it would always break and everything. So the idea was if you do a really, great piece of software, you're actually going to be helping people do their job. So really that was part of, on the one side, from the customer and sort of the ethical side, it's like you're bringing value. You have to bring value. And you don't want to do what they used to call vaporware, where, you have these products that say they do all this sort of stuff and it doesn't do anything. So the idea is you really want to make a quality product that helps people. The part that's interesting about that is when you do the spiritual practice, meditating, looking within, all the stuff, your intuition develops. It gets better. And so like our teacher would say, you're a nobody, you're trying to get in touch with someone at a company, and you call and you get the secretary, you call, you get the secretary, you're never going to get through to this guy. Said, you just wait for the moment, and a moment will come when you're going to go, I got a call right now. And you call, and the secretary just went out to get a drink of coffee, and the guy picks up the phone.
Right.
And sure enough, that happened quite a bit. And at first it didn't, but then I started focusing on that and doing that. So, there was a way in which, you're using, now you talk about superheroes, someone would say, oh, that's a superhero type. If you look at X-Men, that's a sort of an X-Men thing, right?
Right.
Just know when the right moment is to call, and boom, there you have it. So, it was also a very interesting way of reconciling that. So,
got it. That. Yeah, no, totally understood. That makes sense. Now, from AutoSys, did you go back to, Rama and say, hey, okay, I did that. What's next? And he said, hey, why don't you do a movie? Or where did that desire was that back to the, what you would do when you were little, like, hey, I want to make a movie now? Was that the inspiration?
Not exactly. Well, first off, when I sold AutoSys, I realized I sold the goose that laid the golden egg. Yeah. I did okay, but the product to date has generated $2 billion worth of revenues. Wow. So, I sold the goose that laid the golden egg. So that pissed me off. And then I did a second software company. It was kind of a follow-along product. Mm-hmm. And that one, because now I had, once you go down the path, I didn't know much about business the first time around. The second time I did. So that company I had sold in less than a year after I started it. Nice. And then after that, then I'm like, okay, now I'm done. Now I'm really, I'm orbiting the earth. Money's not going to pull me back down. I left the study with Rama and ended up going to Ramtha School of Enlightenment, which is, Ramtha was the teacher, and Ramtha is this being that was channeled by this woman. And I went out there, not with the idea of making movies or anything, but I just went out there, and then a guy that I knew made a documentary about Ramtha, and I saw the documentary and I thought, that's not very good. It was too much of like an infomercial. It was too much of the devotee. Here's the wonderful teacher, and I thought, I could, and I had some money laying around from my company. So I said, I'm just going to make I always wanted to make movies. Why don't I make a little documentary about the sort of stuff that we were learning at the school? A lot of it is in what the BLEEP. It's like quantum physics, how that ties in. And that, of course, was one of my earlier interests. So I started off just thinking I'm going to make a dinky little documentary. And again, here comes Spanky and our gang. I get more and more inspired. Let's make it better. Oh, let's put in animation. And, 3 years later, I had What the Bleep. So it was, in that case, what sort of moved me on was I would tell friends who weren't really doing the spiritual thing about some of the ideas in it, and everyone was fascinated. And I realized there was a huge audience out there that was really looking for this information. And that was kind of what pulled me along, was the fact that there were these people who just would find this so interesting that was one thing that pulled me on. Another thing was at that time, if you told people you were meditating and doing that stuff, they kind of looked at you like you were crazy or you were going to drink the Kool-Aid or something. And so I wanted to show people that when you're on the path, it's not just like, spaceball woo-woo stuff. You have to use your mind. You have to examine. You have to think about things. You have to question things. And so I wanted to bring that forward, and all that combined for What the Bleep.
Indeed. Now, what I like about the way you just said that is that I'm just going to make a quote unquote little documentary, a little film. And that little film is what, over 100 million people have seen it?
Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Was that was not by design then?
No, I mean, I started off, I had a budget of $50,000 to make this movie. And by the time I was done, it cost me $6 million. So, I just kind of got, once more, I got inspired and kind of carried away. And I had the feeling, look, I have a shot here to maybe really do something. So I'm not going to, as they say, pull the punch. I'm going to give it my all.
I'm hoping that if nothing else you gain from this, that it really doesn't matter who you are, where you're from, what you've done. If you have received the inspiration to actually go make something happen, please just go do it, whatever it is. Become better at taking inspiration and letting it answer yes and just move forward. In fact, that's something we've recently done in the whole space of short-term rentals. What do I mean? I mean, figuring out how to use sites like TripAdvisor, Expedia, Booking.com, Airbnb, etc., to the advantage for your own real estate and real estate portfolio. How can you build a business using these marketing strategies? Well, what's interesting is that we're going to start showing you guys how to do exactly that. If you want to know more information, go over to cashflowdiary.com/coming soon. Again, that's cashflowdiary.com/coming soon. Last time, cashflowdiary.com/coming soon. I think you're going to enjoy the training that we are about to put down. With that being said, let's get back to Will. Now, I get that. So, are we going to see another movie?
Well,
not inspired anyway to do that again?
I did make another movie.
Okay.
This one was not that successful. This movie is called Ghetto Physics.
Did you say Ghetto Physics?
I said Ghetto Physics.
This is awesome.
And the subtitle from this was, "Will the real pimps and hoes please stand up?"
Okay, this is good. Okay, yeah, all right. That
yeah,
one.
You didn't see that one coming, did you?
No, I did not. I would have not seen that coming for quite some time.
Yeah. And what happened was this guy saw What the Bleep, and he was an African American. He grew up in South LA, and he had come up with this idea, this concept, "Will the real pimps and hoes please stand up?" And really, it's really a look at the power structures that are existing in the world. The premise being that you see the people on the top of the power thing, but it's the same dynamic as what you see on the street. The only difference is the people at the top are much better about packaging it, so you don't realize the games that they're playing. You don't get the game, but it's the same game. So really, we looked at that interplay between the powerful and the people who are just the worker bees who do all the work, and looked at that in society. So we did that. It was artistically, people really liked the movie, but it was a little much for people. It was a little in your face, and people didn't like that. Although I think nowadays people may want to take a second look at it. We will see.
Yeah, indeed. So from all of this, you then come up with the not so little book of surprises. I mean, this has got to be the most twisty story that we've had on the show ever. I mean, it's like all of these things are very, very loosely connected, And I'm just, so help me bridge the gap just help me bridge that gap. How do we get over to this now?
Well, I'm so glad you said twisty and not twisted. So anyway, how did I get to Not So Little Book of Surprises? Well, talk about surprises. At the age of 62, I got married for the first time.
That's a surprise.
As a surprise. And I married the lovely Deirdre Hade.
Mm-hmm.
And she is a spiritual teacher and a mystic and a writer and lots of stuff. So we got married, and she's been writing this book, and I was kind of helping her with the structure of it. And then someone suggested, they said, I think you could take some of Deirdre's teachings and some of her poetry and put some pictures with it and make a little book. And she wants to get a book out there, and you could probably just do that fairly easily. And I thought, you're right. I started to think about it, and within a day of thinking about it, I had come up with the whole concept of the Little Book of Surprises. And what it is she has just, 10 years of teaching transcripts. I mean, if they're in book form, it would be about a foot high. And so wow. I thought, I can just do it like I was doing a movie. When you do a documentary movie, you're always working on transcripts. And so you're reading through transcripts, you pull out sound bites, things you think are really pertinent. And so I just started doing that. I started going through these transcripts. And in about a day and a half, I had a 60-page book put together. She had a friend who was a photographer. She said, why don't you see if he has any pictures? So I go to his website. He has 3,000 pictures laying around. And this guy, his name is Andre Balog, is such an artist. He had all these amazing pictures that he didn't know what to do with. Because talk about entrepreneurship, he's not an entrepreneur.
Right.
He's an artist.
Right.
Beautiful, gorgeous pictures. He wins awards all the time. And no one ever, they don't really go anywhere.
Right.
He was also a concert violinist who apparently did his first concert in public at the age of 4.
Wow.
Yeah. So he's really an artist. And so within, a month, I had a 60-page prototype, I called it, put together of this book. And 2 months later, I had the book done. And again, I was using the skills of documentary filmmaking to basically pull the quotes and clean them up a little bit and associate pictures and put a through line through so it all kind of makes sense in a coherent form. And that was the Not So Little Book of Surprises.
As I listen to you and hear about your journey, it's pretty much, it feels like you're like, you know what? Whatever inspires me today, this week, next month, if I am inspired enough, I'll figure out a way to build a business around it and go with it. That's what I'm hearing. Is entrepreneurship really that easy?
Well, first off, what you said for me is true. That's basically it. The whole trick to me is if I get inspired, then I'll just I'll go do it. Everyone has a different thing on getting rolling. Some people.
But hold 1 second, Will. This is what I'm really getting at. Yeah, I know that everyone has a different thing, but some people spend so much time trying to figure out what on earth am I going to do? What's my business going to be? You don't seem to get caught up in that at all.
No, I don't. And I know, I see what you're saying now. Yeah, I mean, they often in getting started, the first thing is the first step, and that's the hardest. Because, often, I mean, in all the things I've done, when I started, I didn't really know what I was doing. And there's that, when you talked about the courage, that's part of it. People have a fear about, I don't quite know what I'm doing. I don't know about this. I don't know if it's going to work. And if you stay in that frame of mind, you'll never take the first step. And without the first step, it never happens. So that's the whole thing about the entrepreneur. I'm sure you've talked about the old risk-reward equation.
Right.
Is, the more risk you take, the greater the potential for the reward, and of course, the greater the potential to fall on your face. So
really hard.
Yeah, and so that's really something that if people who are thinking about launching themselves, that's just part of something that's probably going to come up.
Yeah. Now, well, then let me ask you this: how does one? Let's pretend for a second that someone listening right now is like, okay, I want to, do this, but they're stuck right there. How do you develop that? We'll call it thick skin, that courage that you said it more than once. You don't care about other people saying that you're crazy or thinking, that you're a little off. And I agree to a point that that's necessary for an entrepreneur to keep going. But how do you develop that? Because it sounds like you were just born with it.
I was pretty much born with it for, whatever reason. How do you develop it? I mean, I know some people, and I do this also too. I did this because there's dark nights of the soul when you're doing your company and, it's really not working. And there's all these stories. There's like the story of Colonel Sanders, Mr. Kentucky Fried Chicken. And,
Yes.
he was, turned down 999 times on this thing. And finally, he was about ready to throw in the towel. And someone said, well, I think we're going to give your little Kentucky Fried Chicken thing a try. I'm friends with Jack Canfield, and he wrote the Chicken Soup for the Soul books. And, Jack has told these stories about how he said this one day he was in New York to sell the book, and they had 14 meetings with publishers that day, and every one of them turned him down.
Nice.
Every one of them turned him down. And I think that the Chicken Soup for the Soul books is the second most published book to the Bible now. So there are these stories about how the thing is, if you're doing something new, something really unique, the establishment is probably not going to jump on it right away. I had a company when I did AutoSys that I contacted. They were a bigger software company, see about them reselling it. And they said, why did you do that? No one in this technology will ever use that product. And 2 years later, they were trying to buy my company.
Right.
So you have to realize, and that's one thing I think is really important. I ran into this with the new book, the little not so little book of surprises, because it's like a coffee table book, and it's like, well, is it a gift book? Well, it's kind of a gift book, but it's also a book of spiritual wisdom, and it's a book of poetry. So no one knows where to classify it. Anything new, you can never put it in a convenient bucket. So they're trying to classify it, and the salespeople for it don't know what to do with it. Because what's it like? Well, it's not really like anything. Well, we don't know how to sell it. So when you run into the corporate world, you run into what exists out there, probably what you're going to come up with, most people in the business are going to tell you, no way. I'm sure people told Elon Musk with his Tesla cars that was crazy. Come on. That GM tried this 10 years ago. No one's going to want to buy an electric car.
Right. Totally get that.
Yeah. So, I mean, one thing that's where you really, as an entrepreneur, you have to believe in what you do, that there really is value there.
So, because your experience is so wide and varied, I've got to ask this because I run into a number of people, and a number of people contact us on their way to, becoming entrepreneurs, and because they feel like every industry is so vastly different from the last thing that they were in. I'm just going to ask, you've traversed so many different fields. What have you found that's like similar over and over and over again, from being a research laser physicist to movies to software companies to now books? What's been the same?
I think the one thing that kind of is the same as what I just said, is that sense of, if you're really doing something unique, most people in the business are going to tell you, no, there's no market for that. Forget about it. And that's the one thing that I've noticed over and over. When What the Bleep was finished, we did a screening for distributors, and there was about 10 of them came, and they watched the movie. And after we said, well, did you like the movie? They said, yeah, it was pretty interesting. Yeah, it's pretty. Well, you want to distribute it? Well, of course not. No one is going to go into a movie theater to see a movie about quantum physics and spirituality. No, you're crazy. And they all walked out. That was it. So we had to distribute it ourselves until we started doing such good numbers that all the distributors were like, oh yeah, okay, well, maybe, yeah, now we're interested, which is something, I guess, to say to entrepreneurs, you got to hang in there. And a lot of times if the powers that be say, no, we're not interested, you may have to develop your own sales channel to get it out there. And once you start doing numbers, nothing, gets success like success. Once they start seeing numbers, then they're happy to jump on the bandwagon. But my experience has been that that just, unless you have that push, unless you can show value, ain't gonna fly.
Yep, totally understood. Now, with all that you've said here, I know there's a number of people who have listened and they just want more of what you were talking about. Maybe even pick up a copy of the not so little book of surprises. What's going to be the best way for them to connect with you and or find out more about what you guys are doing, or even pick up a copy of the book?
Well, we have a website now, bookofsurprises.com. So that's probably the place to go. And there's, social media and all that kind of stuff there to connect. There's sort of a fun little flip book I put together. It's an electronic ebook that actually has some videos embedded in, so you get a sense of the book. And that's really the best way to do it. Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
I would say the book isn't really, you're not going to pick up this book necessarily and say, okay, I'm going to go, climb that mountain. But it is a book of understanding yourself more. But this goes back to my software project with the spiritual teacher. There is something when you evolve, when you look at yourself, when you examine yourself, you go through these basic spiritual practices, you really, you become much more aware of what's going on. And let me tell you, ideas and solutions to unsurmountable problems happen more once your mind is clear, once you get to know yourself better.
Yeah, I totally get that. Now, as we wind down here, I've got a final question for you because I think your answer is going to be like perfect for a number of people. So let's pretend for a moment that someone is listening who is what I would say they're on the edge, they're on the precipice, they're thinking, you know what, I want to do this entrepreneurial thing. In fact, let's just say that they're standing in front of the superhero outfit store, ready to pick out their cape and tights, ready to jump in. However, in the back of their mind, they have that voice. And I know you know that voice. You've talked about it a lot. I know you've dealt with it. And for them, it's that voice that comes up anytime we think we're going to go do something great, or we declare an intention that this is the direction I'm going to go. And it comes up to remind us of, who we're not and how we haven't. And for some people, they're even related to that voice. So my question to you is, let's say that this person that's listening is actually going to follow through. They're going to do exactly what you suggest. What would you suggest that they do? Meaning they're going to do it in the next 24 to 48 hours. What would you suggest that they do?
I would say do a little time traveling.
Time traveling?
Time traveling. Think of who you are 5 years from now. And you're looking back on this moment. Do you want to have the regret that you didn't follow your dream, follow your passion? And 5 years from now, do you want to be sitting around some night with friends and going, oh, gee, I really wish I had done this. Or I really, I had that idea 5 years ago. And then 2 years ago, they came out with a product and and I had it much earlier, but gee, I didn't. I mean, do you really want to be sitting on the porch thinking about that you pulled the plug on your dream when you knew you had something? That's what I would say. And that's what I did say.
Clearly, clearly, because whatever idea has come to you, that's been the thing that you have done. I definitely want to say this though, that I appreciate just the spirit about you and this just the ability to go, you know what, this is what I'm going to do now, and to head in that direction and to make that happen. And I definitely want to say thank you for taking the time to share your knowledge, insight, and wisdom here with us today at the Cashflow Diary.
Well, it's been a lot of fun. It's been a great interview. We also had a couple good laughs, so that's always important. And thank you, and for all those folks out there listening. I mean, yeah, go do your dream.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, you know what time it is. It's time for you to move at the speed of instruction. What does that mean today? That means bookofsurprises.com, because hey, you never know what is you are capable of, let alone what you could do if you would just be brave enough to follow that intuition, that little voice in the back of your head is also pointing you in directions that you know you want to go. More importantly, what happens if you get inspired and it turns into something big? Ladies and gentlemen, it's been fun talking to you guys today. I look forward to talking to you soon. Until next time.